The chairman of the Obama Foundation just happens to look like your oldest daughter. And his wife, who is a doctor, who is credited with delivering your babies, just happens to look like your youngest daughter. The Obamas aren't blind, and their family and friends, and America's not blind. Somebody has to explain this. It's worthy of an explanation, or you should have got rid of these people. And so, literally, like, distance yourself from them. You got rid of Reverend Wright. You distanced yourself from him. Don't make this man the head of the Obama Foundation if he looks just like your oldest daughter. And just the whole story, I mean, the woman delivers the baby. This woman delivers the baby and looks just like the youngest baby. Somebody, please.
Barack. As a native of Chicago that watched your policies not do a single thing for black people, not anything for crime, not anything for a better way of living, it is insulting that you decided to get up here and pander us as black men for not voting for Kamala Harris. You are only voting for Kamala yourself because you have no choice. We both know that deep down inside, you wanted the open convention, but the optics didn't look good. We also both know that there were way better candidates that you guys could have went with for president, but you guys didn't. And so now they bring you out, the big guns, because they need you to come up here and clean up this mess. Because you know what? You are a well-spoken man. Because I can tell you right now that your nominee is not. I can tell you that your nominee doesn't answer questions. Your nominee stutters all the time, and she spits out word salads. And you expect for us to vote for her. I'm black. I'm not stupid. I vote for policies. I vote for what's going to allow for my way of living to change. I vote so that everyone can have a chance and continue to be a free thinker and not have censorship. And then you got up here on this stage and insulted every black man in America. And it's not okay. And so now you guys are sitting here and you want us to vote for this administration, who has caused the highest inflation, grocery prices suck, and they let everybody in the border. And if I remember, Barack Obama, you were the deporter in chief. You deported over 3 million people. And for your nominee to not even be smart enough that when someone asks her a question, what would she do differently than what Joe Biden did, and her to say nothing is even more wild. So before you decide to get up here and attack every single black man on this planet, I want you to take a self-reflection and think about the behaviors that you're doing and that you're trying to put on us because we don't want to vote for Kamala. I want you to really look down deep inside of yourself and say, would you really vote for her if you wasn't a part of the Democratic Party? If it wasn't your job, would you really vote for her? I'm pretty sure you wouldn't. Because the scrutiny that you went through to become president, she hasn't even went through. No one voted for her at all. You guys inserted her. And so now here you come, being the sweeper in chief to try to clean up the mess. But I got a surprise for you, Barack. We are going to continue to be free thinkers. We're going to continue to fight people who want to censor us. We're going to continue to be the people that we need to be because we are starting to arise. Because I don't like the word woke. We are starting to arise to the occasion so that we can create a better America where Democrats and conservatives and independents can live freely and prosperous. And you're right, we do need to turn the page because the book that I'm reading right now, if I turn the page based on what Kamala said about her own self, I would be signing up to read the book a little bit longer for 4 more years. And that's not what I want to do.
I am the ex-wife of Philip Kramer, and I have something personal to share about Kamala Harris that's been weighing on me for years. Kamala Harris didn't just destroy my husband's career, she destroyed my family. Philip Kramer was a respected attorney who fought for homeowners after the '08 mortgage crisis. He stood up to the big banks and tried to bring justice for those who were cheated out of their homes. But Kamala Harris, she didn't care about justice, she cared about her political future. When she raided my husband's law firm and froze our assets, she didn't just ruin his career, she took everything, our savings, our children's college funds, even our boys' bank accounts that had $100 or so of birthday money from their grandparents. She left us with nothing, no way to fight back, no way to recover. If it weren't for the financial help of family and friends, I really would be homeless right now. I watched my family fall apart. Also, Kamala Harris could cozy up to the banks and advance her career. The very theories that Philip developed to hold banks accountable, she used them to cut a deal and let them off with a slap on the wrist. While my family was left in ruin, she claimed victory. I'm drowning in debt. There's no way I can ever recover from this. My children and I paid the price for her ambition. We were collateral damage, and I'm speaking out now because the truth needs to be heard. What she did wasn't justice, it was political manipulation at the highest level, and we're still living with the consequences. Kamala Harris may have moved on to higher offices, but we're still picking up the pieces of what she left behind. So much for her rhetoric about middle-class families being the backbone of America. She decimated mine.
New lockdowns are starting in Massachusetts. Check this out.
This is a rant video, but the next round of lockdowns has started. Where, you may ask? Where liberty was born but no longer resides, the state of Massachusetts. 4 towns have decided they're going to start voluntary lockdowns because one person in the entire state of Massachusetts has contracted EE, Eastern Equine Encephalitis. Now, Massachusetts has had EE show up in mosquitoes for a long, long time. And they've had a few people here or there get sick, but none in the last 3 years. One person now has contracted EE. So unfortunately, the following towns are going to start voluntary lockdowns, but I'll tell you how voluntary it really is. It hurts me, it pains me that these towns are where I last resided for the last 20 plus years. Douglas, Oxford, Sutton, and Webster. Webster, Mass. is the home of Lake Chagagagog, Manchagagog, Chabunagungamog. Look it up. Now, this is a voluntary lockdown. How voluntary, you ask? Well, the town of Oxford, one of the 4 that are starting this lockdown, according to what I'm seeing right now, the Board of Health voted to support the recommendation for people to remain indoors after 6 p.m., effective immediately through September 30th. So give up your freedom. Don't spray yourself with off or use Skin So Soft. Stay inside, be afraid of a mosquito, and be good little subjects. But it gets worse. Starting on October 1st, they're going to move that up an hour. They recommend staying inside from 5 p.m. through sunup until the first hard frost of the year. And nobody really knows when that happens because it's just weather. And whenever that happens, then they say you should be able to be free. But we saw this stuff happen before. Give up your freedoms because government is scaring people. One victim of this virus and everybody else is going to lose their rights. Then there's this. This is a quote from the Board of Health in Oxford. It is the Board of Health's responsibility to protect the public health, and we take EE very seriously. And we are strongly encouraging residents to follow these recommendations due to the severity of EE and the fact that it is in our community. And that was a spokesperson for the town of Oxford, Massachusetts. Again, one case. A good friend of mine, and I know he's going to see this, my friend Ronnie posted this on his Instagram, and I think it's spot on. He said, "We have become an absolutely ridiculous nanny state in Massachusetts. We live in one of these 4 towns, and it's truly hard to comprehend that nearly 250 years ago, farmers from these very towns walked to Lexington and Concord to fight for our freedoms. We have been dealing with Triple E since I can remember, and now the overreaction to one case is causing a COVID-like panic. The following information is directly from the mass.gov website. Quote, the most recent outbreak began in 2019 with 12 cases and 6 deaths, and continued into 2020 with 5 cases and 1 death. There were no human cases of Triple E in Massachusetts in 21, 22, or 23. If you do the math, that's a 0.0000001% death rate with a population of 7 million in the state. I do feel sorry for the person who is currently infected and hope for a full recovery, but this overreaction is just an indicator of how our politicians and communities were conditioned to the COVID voluntary lockdowns, which eventually became mandatory, to which a large majority, including myself, stuck our middle finger up to. Calling out to all the people who I know and love in those 4 towns and have spent 2.5 decades with, do not comply. This is a test going into an election in which they are very worried about losing. Those 4 towns generally vote red, generally. Guys and gals, use your brains. Do what you've been doing your entire life when mosquitoes come out, and take care of yourself the way you know you can.
It's all a scare tactic. Do not comply.
A chance to sit down with Eric Hecker. He worked at the South Pole Station in Antarctica, and he's one of only a handful of people. He used to actually work for Raytheon, and then he saw what they were doing at the South Pole Station, and you won't believe what he discovered. He then became a whistleblower. He testified in front of the United States Senate under threat of perjury, and what he saw was astonishing. And so he was flabbergasted when people are sitting there saying there's no such thing as weather modification. What he worked on at the South Pole Station makes the HARP project up in Alaska look like a baby project. The machines that are at the South Pole Station that are able to control earthquakes and the weather, and not only that, is a giant UFO control tower, which is a neutrino control tower. So I had a chance to speak with Eric, but we specifically talked about the weather modification tools. And so here, I want to play a little bit of this interview for you with Eric Hecker. Let's talk about the weather piece of this. So we're seeing the weather manipulation. We've covered this extensively here on the show. The NextRad radar systems that have been used to direct and move these storms in a path of destruction. The control of these storms is unbelievable. And I think most Americans were kind of silent, didn't realize that this was actually happening. I think the cat is out of the bag on all of this now. But I'm curious what the South Pole Station is, and when you work there, how it actually is able to be used as an earthquake generating machine, what else it's doing there, and maybe how this is tied to the current weather events and all of the things that we're seeing right now across the United States. Can you give our audience more of an overview of that?
Absolutely. The South Pole Station has a system known as the Ice Cube Neutrino Detector. It is currently the world's largest phased array transmitter. This is basically Tesla technology. I'm sure a lot of the audience is familiar with systems like HARP, which is effectively built on the surface of the Earth, and it has a 2D situation. It has length and width as far as a phased array goes. The South Pole Station differs insofar as it also goes down deep into the ice, giving it a third dimension, length, width, and height. So it has exponential more, I guess you would say, capabilities, targeting discharge of power. And yeah, it's like HARP on steroids, basically. So yes, it generated the earthquakes that occurred in Christchurch, New Zealand in February of 2011.
And you told me before, I'll let you go on in a second, but when you and I chatted on the phone a few weeks ago, you mentioned, I don't know if you can say this now or if I'm telling tales out of school here, but you were speaking to a source that you worked with at the South Pole Station. Since you left there, said the technology has gotten so advanced now with these generation of earthquakes that it's like an autopilot system in an aircraft. I think you described it, that it's so advanced now, it would blow your mind at how targeted these earthquakes are that they can use from this South Pole Station.
Basically, the trick of it all, one of the things that I learned when I went to this event in Alamos, Colorado, I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Simeon Hine, and he was doing a presentation on ball lightning. And one of the things that he discussed was how there are reports when earthquakes occur that ball lightning, I guess you would say, is ejected, manufactured by the earthquake. So I engaged him in a dialogue, and I said, well, Doc, wouldn't there be some sort of symmetry there, that if an earthquake can discharge ball lightning, wouldn't we be able to deliver ball lightning to generate an earthquake? And he agreed that it's just simply the matter of being able to deliver said energy, which for all practical purposes, think of it having an explosive capacity to it. So if you can wirelessly transmit energy from a power supply somewhere on Earth, deliver it to another location, the end result is quite simply an earthquake. Wireless transmission of energy is something that Nikola Tesla has brought up, 100 some odd years ago now. So this is the state of the union, is that Nikola Tesla discovered this stuff. The powers that be absconded his information. They cordoned it off away from the mass population and have been monopolizing the use of these types of technologies for many decades now. We, the people, are suffering under this monopoly of technology by our oppressors. It's literally just that simple. And that would be the motive for them to have agents, for lack of a better term, flooding the disclosure community with BS to muddy the waters and confuse us, we the people, so that we can continue to be wholly oppressed and well managed.
When you were at the South Pole Station, you witnessed this ice cube neutrino machine in action. So it goes deep, and it's and much larger than HAARP. And I guess just walk us through what they would be using this for. How would they be manipulating the weather? How would they be manipulating and targeting earthquakes around the world? Why would they be doing this? And who is in control of the South Pole Station at this point? Is it the United States government? You were a contractor with Raytheon when you were there. Is it a private enterprise? Who is controlling it?
Great questions. First and foremost, one of the things that the former crew members had emphasized to me to try to get people to understand, as I'm trying to get this information out there, is that you have to understand it's just very easy now to deliver that energy anywhere on the planet. It's not challenging.
Like they can pick a spot. They can pick a spot in Iran, and they can just dial it in on the computer and launch an earthquake.
Deliver the energy that instigates it. The term that people should become familiar with is earthquake induction or earthquake inducing. So similar to like when you go on the internet and you Google chemtrails, right? You're going to get a whole bunch of baloney that says chemtrails are garbage, blah, blah. But if you Google the term stratospheric aerosol injection, you'll start to find all of the science of what's really going on when they crisscross our skies. So
and the patents and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So right. if you look up inducing earthquakes or earthquake induction, you will become privy to a sea of information and science that supports the existence of this technology. It's just that available. People just need to start paying attention to what's going on in the world around them and this disparity in technology. As far as who's running the facility, I'm not 100% sure. This was part of that conversation that I had in Washington, D.C., is because it seems like these, unacknowledged special access programs, USAP, which anybody who's paying close attention, USAP is the actual...
There was a rumor going around that there had been a book written about a young boy named Barron Trump, whose dad becomes the last president of the United States, the Republic of the United States. This book was reported to have been written sometime in the 1800s. So as usual, me, Samantha, went digging. Not only did I find the book, I bought the book. And today we're going to deep dive for the first time into this book. I can tell you what I found out about the author, whose name was Ingersoll Lockwood. From everything I found, yes, he was a Christian. Yes, he had a lot of work in government, everywhere from embassies to even being over a prison at one point. Now, I will share more about the author further into the video, so you're not going to want to turn it off, guys, because this is all very important.
The reason I find this interesting is because President Trump's son is named Barron. And we have all heard rumors, prophecies, and words given by people saying that President Trump will legitimately be America, the Republic, the United States of America, the constitutional republic's very last president, right? I mean, if you're a Christian, if you're living in this day and age, you've heard somebody say that. So to have found a book that was published on this date over 100 and almost 30 years ago, talking about the last president of the United States in a trilogy with a young boy named Barron Trump, well, I couldn't pass it up. Now, whether you believe a time traveler wrote this, a demon, or somebody filled with the Holy Spirit, the fact is the book was written. And right now, together, I'm going to read some excerpts out of it. Not much, because I believe if you want to read it, you need to purchase it. But I'm going to read some of the good stuff for you guys. Get ready, sit back, get something to drink, tell her ready to go away and give mom and dad a few minutes. Because folks, this is amazing. Now I'm going to read for you some sections of this book because I think these are very important. Throughout the length and the breadth of the South and beyond the Great Divide, the news struck every hamlet and village like the glad tidings of a new evangel, almost as potent for human happiness as the heavenly message of 2,000 years ago. Bells rang out in joyful acclaim, and the very stars trembled at the telling over and over of what had been done for the poor man by his brethren of the North. And around the blazing pine knots of the southern cabin and in front of the mining camps of the far west, the cry went up, "Silver is king. Silver is king." Black palms and white were clasped in that strange love feast, and the dark-skinned grandchild no longer felt the sting of the lash on his sire's shoulder. All was peace and goodwill, for the people were at last victorious over their enemies who had taxed and tied them into a very living death. Now the laborer would not only be worthy of his hire, but it would be paid to him in a people's dollar for the people's good, and now the rich man's coffers would be made to yield up their ill-gotten gain. And the sun would look upon this broad and fair land and find no man without a market for the product of his labors. Henceforth, the rich man should, and was right and proper, pay a royal sum for the privilege of his happiness and take the nation's taxes on his broad shoulders where they belong. Motley armies marched upon the capital of the Republic. The railway trains, night and day, brought vast crowds of new men, politicians of low degree, men out of employment, drunken and disgruntled mechanics, farmers' sons to seek their fortunes under the reign of the people, healers and hangers-on of ward bosses, old men who had not tasted office for 30 years or more, all inspired by Mr. Bryan's declaration that the American people are not in favor of life tenure in the civil service, that a permanent office holding class is not in harmony with our institutions, that a fixed term and appointed offices would open the public service to a large number of citizens without impairing its efficiency. All bearing news in their hands or across their shoulders, each and every one of them supremely confident that in the distribution of the spoils, something would surely fall to his share, since they were the common people who were so dear to Mr. Bryan and who had made him president in the very face of prodigious opposition of the rich men, whose coffers had been thrown wide open all to no purpose, and in spite, too, of the satanic and truly devilish power of that hell upon earth known as Wall Street, which had sweated gold in vain in its desperate efforts to fasten the chains of trust and the claws of soulless monsters known as corporation upon these very common people, soon to march in triumph before the silver chariot of the young conqueror from the West. The inaugural address was not a disappointment to those who had come to hear it. It was like the man who delivered it, bold, outspoken, unmistakable in its terms, promising much, impatient of precedent, reckless of result, a double confirmation that this was to be the reign of the common people. That much should be unmade and much made over. And no matter how the rich man might cry out in anger or amazement, the nation must march on to the fulfillment of a higher and nobler mission than the impoverishment and degradation of the millions for the enrichment and elevation of the few. Then he threw himself into a chair and, seizing a sheet of official paper, penned the following order and directed its immediate promulgation. Executive Mansion, Washington, D.C., March 4th, 1897, Executive Order Number 1. In order that there may be immediate relief in the terrible financial depression now weighing upon our beloved country, consequent upon and resulting from the unlawful combination of capitalists and money lenders both in this republic and in England, and that the ruinous and inevitable progress toward a universal gold standard may be stayed, the President orders and directs the immediate abandonment of the so-called gold reserve, and that on and after the promulgation of this order, the gold and silver standard of the Constitution be resumed and strictly maintained in all the business transactions of this government. It was 2:00 in the afternoon when the news of this now world-famous executive order was flashed into the great banking centers of the country. Its effect in Wall Street beggars description. On the floor of the stock exchange, men yelled and shrieked like painted savages, and in their mad struggles tore and trampled each other. Many dropped in fainting fits or fell exhausted from their wild and senseless efforts to say what none would listen to. Ashen pallor crept over the faces of some while the blood threatened to burst the swollen arteries that spread in purple network over their brows of others. When silence came at last, it was silence broken by sobs and groans. Some wept, while others stood dumbstruck, as if it was all a bad dream, and they were awaiting the return of their poor, distraught senses to set them right again. Ambulances were hastily summoned, and fainting and exhausted forms were borne through the hushed and whispering masses wedged into Wall Street, to be whirled away uptown to their residences, there to come into full possession of their senses, only to cry out in their anguish that ruin, black ruin, stared them in the face if this news from Washington should prove true. So he's basically saying in this book that the first executive order of this president, in this book, right, would be to actually back the United States dollar with gold or silver, making it an actual weighted currency, ending the New World Order, going over to a digital currency. Because our paper, money's worthless. It's not backed by anything anymore. Could you imagine if Trump did this? What Wall Street, what happened there? Could you imagine how quickly the rich would lose their wealth? Let that sink in, folks. The first act to pass both houses and receive the signature of the president was an act repealing the Act of 1873 and opening the mint of the United States to the free coinage of silver at the ratio of 16:1 with gold, and establishing branch mints in the cities of Denver, Omaha, Chicago, Kansas City, Spokane, Los Angeles, Charleston, and Mobile. The announcement that reparation had thus been made to the people for the crime of 1873 was received with loud cheering on the floors and in the galleries of both houses. And the great North heard these cheers and trembled. "We are the people," wrote the president. "We the people," says my shirt, right? So it's so cool, guys. And then it goes on to say, when a Republican member of the House arose to move the usual adjournment for the holidays, there was a storm of hisses and cries of "No, no," said the leader of the House amid deafening applause. "We are the servants of the people. Our work is not yet complete. There must be no play for us while coal barons stand with their feet on the ashes of the poor man's hearthstones, and weeds and thorns cumber the fields of the farmer for lack of money to buy seed and implements. There must be no play for us while railway magnates press from the pockets of the laboring man 6 and 8% return on thrice watered stocks. And the landlords, enriched by inheritance, grind the faces of the poor. There must be no play for us while enemies of humankind are by means of trust and combination in corners, engaged in drawing their unholy millions from the very lifeblood of the nation, paralyzing its best efforts and setting the blight of intemperance and indifference upon it, by making life but one long struggle for existence, and indifference upon it, by making life but one long struggle for existence, without a gleam of rest and comfort in old age. No, Mr. Speaker, we must not adjourn, but by our efforts in these halls of legislation, let the nation know that we are at work for its emancipation. And by these means, let the monopolists and the money changers be brought to a realizing sense that the reign of the common people has really been entered upon. And then the bells will ring out happier, gladder New Year than has ever dawned upon this republic. So I want you to think about our elderly right now. How I showed you guys the other day that they have cut food stamps in the state of Hawaii. Yeah, they have reduced American citizens' food stamps, and of all places, Hawaii, right? Now, I want you to hear this last little bit, and then my best advice to you is get this book, friend. The opposition fairly quailed before the vigor and earnestness of this new dispensation. There were soon before the House and pressed well on toward final passage a number of important measures calculated to awaken an intense feeling of enthusiasm among the working classes. Among these was an act establishing a loan commission for the loaning of certain monies of the United States to farmers and planters without interest. What? An act for the establishment of a permanent Department of Public Works. Its head to be styled Secretary of Public Works, rank as a cabinet officer and supervise the expenditure of all public monies for the construction of public buildings and the improvement of rivers and harbors. An act making it a felony punishable with imprisonment for life for any citizen or combination of citizens to enter into any trust or agreement to stifle, suppress, or in any way interfere with full, open, and fair competition in trade and manufacturing among the states. You guys, I would vote for any president that would do just a little bit I've talked about. Look, we're going to keep going, but it's time for me to feed my husband. It's been a long day, and it's my third video today, guys. I love you. Let me tell you something. If the Holy Spirit has been telling you to do something, whether it's write a book, write a poem, open up a YouTube, start a garden, get out of debt, marry your girlfriend, whatever it is, friend, obedience is better than sacrifice. This gentleman wrote this book. He didn't know that in 2024, a Southeast Louisiana woman would be sitting in her home on September 18th, 2024, reading it to 51,000 people. He didn't know that a young man named Barron Trump, his daddy, would be running for president of the United States. He didn't know any of that. But he had a download for a story from the Holy Spirit. Think about that. The things that make you go, Enjoy this next quick clip about who the author is and a little bit about this book.
Lockwood had established a parallel career as a lecturer and writer. It was common for authors of the time to publish pamphlets and then go on the circuit advertising their thoughts from these pamphlets. In 1884, Lockwood married Winifred Wallace Tinker, a Pennsylvania native and graduate of Vassar College who was born in 1862 and was 21 years his junior. At this time, Ingersoll Lockwood decided to emulate the success of children's books by Lewis Carroll and J.M. Barrie and produced the Barron Trump novels. These are two children's novels written in 1889 and 1893. They remained obscure until 2017, when they received media attention for perceived similarities between their protagonists and U.S. President Donald Trump. Lockwood published the first novel, Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger, in 1889, and its sequel, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, in 1893. The novels recount the adventures of the German boy Wilhelm Heinrich Sebastian von Trump, a similarly long name to Baron Franz von der Trenck, who was one of the heroes Lockwood admired, who goes by Baron Trump, as he discovers weird underground civilizations, offends the natives, flees from entanglements with local women, and repeats the pattern until arriving at Castle Trump, which is on 5th Avenue in New York City. An 1891 reviewer wrote about one of Lockwood's novels, "The author labors through 300 pages of fantastic and grotesque narrative, now and then striking a spark of wit, but the sparks emit little light and no warmth, and one has to fumble for the story." Lockwood's writing style was much better suited to political fanfare, and his work 1900 or The Last President is exciting and well written. Baron Trump lives in a building named after himself, Castle Trump, while the real-life Donald Trump had lived in Trump Tower on 5th Avenue for decades. Furthermore, Donald Trump's youngest son's name is Baron Trump. The Trump family immigrated to the United States from Germany in the 1890s and started speculating in real estate in Seattle in 1891. Before 1918, they had begun to purchase real estate in Queens. The last name Trump would not have been an uncommon one for Longwood to use, and the first name Baron harks back to respected Austrian hero Baron Trenck, which Longwood would have known due to his tenure as ambassador to a German kingdom.